Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar today. Just before I pass you over to Ben and Nick, I just wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping. The webinar is being recorded. A copy of the recording and the slides will be sent to everyone after the event. We also have a Q&A functionality, so please pop any questions you have in the Q&A box, and we've got time for Q&A right at the end. Over to you, Ben.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to see so many of you join in this webinar today. Just a very quick introduction for myself, as some of you may already know. Hi, I'm Ben Davis. I'm the Head of New Business Development here at Chorus, and I've been supporting organizations all across the world with the adoption of all things Dynamics, Dataverse, and Power Platform. And joining me today is Nick.
Morning, everyone. Yep, so I'm Nick Murdoch. I'm the Senior Technical Architect here at Chorus. Working alongside Ben and lots of different organizations, from not-for-profits to commercial base, helping them make the most out of their Power Platform.
Thanks, Nick.
Right,
Next
so
slide, please, Lisa.
On to the next slide.
You got it, Ben?
It's not coming up.
I'll take it, don't worry. So hopefully everyone on the webinar can see it, but the agenda for today is we're going to have a look at understanding the Microsoft Business App Stack. So there is a lot of confusion sometimes in the sector around what exactly makes up the Power Platform. What are the different parts of it? A lot of terminology over the years has changed, and some people like myself that have been working with it for a long time get stuck in the old ways and maybe don't use the most modern terms all the time. So hopefully I'll be able to shed some light on that. We're going to then have a little talk about where's your CRM today. So we have a lot of customers come to us from other suppliers, or maybe they've done it themselves and they have got themselves into a bit of a spot. So we do a lot of work with organizations kind of working out what's the current lay of the land and how do we move on from there. Then Ben and I are going to have a little chat about what the future looks like for CRM, and in this new world of AI and that changes seemingly on a daily basis. What kind of things can we expect? What do we think is coming? Might not necessarily be officially what's coming, but where do we think things are going? And then, as Lisa said at the start, we're going to try and wrap up with some Q&A. So the Microsoft Business Applications Stack is actually way bigger than this. We've kind of taken some highlights of things that our customers get involved with, but if you look around on the net, there's some pretty impressive looking diagrams and infographics around what's involved. But the big headline on here is actually that piece right in the middle of the Dataverse, which is the data platform. So when we're working with the Power Platform, what we're kind of building on top of is the Dataverse, and that is, for all intensive purposes, a software as a service database. It's actually powered by SQL in the back end, but it allows us to very rapidly develop applications. It comes with a full security layer and lots of other things. So on top of that, we have the Power Platform just on the right hand side. So that term kind of encompasses Power Apps, so that might be model driven apps or Canvas apps, Power Automate, which is the little brother of Logic apps in Azure, but basically automation, Power BI for business intelligence, and Power Pages for portals and delivering out public-facing information from the Dataverse. On the left-hand side is Dynamics 365, and this is probably the most confusing piece. So Dynamics 365 is an encompassing term that covers a lot of what we refer to as first-party apps. So they are basically Power Apps that have been developed by Microsoft in-house, built on top of the Dataverse, and then provided as ready-made solutions. So the traditional ones are sales, customer service, field service as well. There's also things like projects and all sorts of things. We've also got underneath that umbrella of Dynamics 365 Business Central, Finance and Operations, Customer Journeys, and they all use the Dataverse in some way. So you can't have the Dynamics 365 apps without the Power Platform powering it. They all use Power Automate and other pieces of it. So sometimes the terminology is interchangeable, but in essence, everything comes back to the Dataverse. Underneath everything and on top of everything, you've got two bars. So on top, we've got Microsoft 365. Again, not to be confused with Dynamics 365. So the Microsoft 365 term is more generic. That's more your SharePoint, your Office, and that kind of world. And then Azure down at the bottom is your more kind of heavy lifting, not so much applications, but functions and functionality. So things like Copilot Studio, custom development would go in there. Fabric, which is the big powerhouse behind Power BI and gives excellent kind of data warehousing capabilities. All of that stuff would sit in your Microsoft Azure tenant and then link in. So there's lots and lots of different bits to it. It can be a bit of a minefield navigating your way around. And it's one of the hardest things is to architect out these solutions and make sure you're using the best tool for the job. So when we're going into planning a new system, should we be using a Dynamics 365 first party app, or can we stick with a Power app? If we stick with a Power app, can we move to a Dynamics 365? No, we can't. So we need to plan ahead as well. So not just for now, but where we might want to go in the future. Right. So what are the most common CRM challenges? There are loads, but obviously we've got kind of 6 to have a look at here. So really, lack of governance and no strategy are, I would bundle them into the same kind of conversation. So governance is incredibly important when it comes to software development and building on a Power Platform. Whilst it's not your traditional software development where you're putting things through Git repositories and that kind of thing, it is still development, and it's development usually of a business critical system. So there needs to be governance around it. It can't be a case of people just go into the production system and just change something, running the risk of breaking things for people, downtime, data loss, all of those kinds of things. But organizations need to make sure that there is a plan for how changes are managed, how they're tested, signed off, stakeholders are happy with them, and things go on into the production system. That comes hand in hand with strategy and plan. So one of the biggest things that we see is CRM systems or dynamic systems or Power Platform systems, however you want to term it, but these systems losing their way. So whilst during implementation, there may have been a very good strategy and plan for what the system needs to be, but over time, the boundaries have been blurred. So one of the best things and worst things about the Power Platform is its extensibility. You can make it do pretty much anything that you want it to do. At the end of the day, it's a relational database with a very rich set of APIs allowing you to get data in and out. That doesn't mean that you should make it do everything that you want it to do. If you have an ERP system, for example, and a CRM system, it's natural to want them to be integrated. But there will be boundaries between the two where you need to decide who's in charge, because having a two-way sync is, or a constant, excuse me, constant two-way sync in place all the time is a very hard thing to maintain. So where does the boundary lie? And keep that in mind. I've seen a lot of systems where suddenly price list maintenance is handled in the CRM system when actually it should always remain in the ERP system. And sometimes there's very good reason for it, but it's just making sure that you challenge yourselves. So inaccurate data, user adoption, complexity, all again kind of come under one umbrella, which is that less strategy side of things and more how is the system used. So time and time again, when we migrate people off of an old system and we ask what's the motivation for moving, the answer is the data is just inaccurate. We can't do any reporting. Unfortunately, that's not because of the system. That's usually because of a lack of ownership, or the system is too complex, or the system hasn't been adopted by the users. Those three items at the bottom usually lead to inaccurate data, which usually leads to loss of faith in the system, which then decreases the user adoption. People start finding other methods of providing the functionality that they need, whether that's spreadsheets or something else. So it's really important to understand why user adoption hasn't taken off, where complexity is within a system. So if someone is already on a CRM system and we're looking at improving it or taking ownership of it, we have to look at what the user adoption is like. Where are the pockets of users that aren't using the system, and why aren't they using it? Is it because of complexity, or is it just because the functionality is not there? And try and treat those. So hopefully we can kind of carve out little areas where we can make improvements to allow people to come into line, and hopefully decrease the impact of that inaccurate data, and hopefully get rid of the inaccurate data altogether. Ownership really plays a part in all of this. So any system within a business should have, especially if it's business critical, should have an owner, someone or people, a team of, who oversee that system. And with a CRM system, especially one built on the Power Platform, it can change over time, and it should change over time as your business grows and changes and technology changes. The system has to change with it, and a collection of people or individuals need to oversee that, because you will have different stakeholders in different parts of the organization all vying for a say of changing the system, and there are ripples that kind of move out through the system and affect other people. And so it's not really good enough to just listen to one cohort of people make a change and then suddenly someone else complains that something's been made and they really relied on it. The only way around that is having someone with an overarching vision of what the system should be, which leads back to that strategy and plan. Ownership also relates to data. So having people or processes in place to keep an eye on the data to make sure that the accuracy doesn't drop. So whether that's just a Power BI report that is run on a periodic basis to see where information lies outside of the expected ranges. So maybe it's fields are missing or data hasn't been updated, or it's jobs that go through regularly to look for duplicates or fuzzy matching, and there are plenty of solutions to do that kind of thing autonomously available. Ownership is a really big thing. So all of these things are challenges. They are not challenges on their own. They are usually influenced by other challenges, and so it's very, very hard just to take one at a time. Usually you have to look at everything together. Thanks, Lisa. Okay, so how can we improve? Well, there are kind of not only three, but three big kind of headings when systems have issues. We've got quick fixes, we've got rebuilding elements, and then we've just got throw it in the bin and start again. And obviously those three carry with it different effort. Sometimes when we look at a system and review it and do interviews with stakeholders and users and talk about user adoption and complexity and all those things that I was just talking about, what we find is there are some quick fixes that can be made for kind of low-hanging fruit. So it may be as simple as there's an option missing in an option set. Fine, we can go through and we can do that, even if we haven't got the whole governance in place. We can probably get some little fixes in to make sure things are okay. And that may well take the pressure off a little bit for a time, but it's not a long-term solution. Quite often, if people are talking to us in this way, those quick fixes are patches. They're not fixing the problem. They're just kind of covering it over for a little bit. Next level up is rebuild, and that's not necessarily an entire system rebuild. That would be the last option. It's more areas of the system that might need rebuilding. So it may be that there's a particular process which runs for a really long time. Maybe there's an integration which has never really worked. Maybe it's not worked because it was built on technology that's since fallen by the wayside. So maybe it was previously built with SSIS packages to do an integration, where actually now one of the systems has got an API that you can now use, and actually that can be modernized and brought a little bit more into line. So sometimes there's some bigger bits of fruit, if you like, to handle that will really improve the way that the system works. And if you do those rebuilds in the right way, they can be reusable for if anyone ever pushes themselves into the third option, which is to start fresh. So whenever you're doing these fixes to system issues, I personally, as an architect, I always tend to think, okay, well, what if that doesn't work? Obviously, I want it to work, and I want it to succeed in improving the system issues. But what if it's not enough? Where do we go from here? What's my plan B, C, D? And going from left to right on this, that's pretty much how it happens. Is okay, well, we can start with the quick fixes, then see how it goes. We can do some rebuilding and see how it goes. If all else fails, we can start fresh. We can rebuild over in a new environment. We can take over the services and integrations and things that we've already rebuilt for you to improve and move those over. And then we can just start fresh. So we can clean the data. We can make sure that the foundations are a bit more solid. Table architecture is better. Things are in the right place. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. We have the benefit of coming into these systems and going, well, what's happening? And being told, well, this doesn't quite work and this doesn't quite work. When you first put in a system, you don't have that. No one has a crystal ball seeing where users will divert around a certain process, or where a process will fall down, or how systems can deviate. We can do our best to guess, and we can use the benefit of experience, but we won't catch everything. When you're coming in to fix system issues, you've got that benefit of seeing where the problems were. And sometimes there are so many problems that you just kind of have to go, okay, if I was to have my time again, or if I was now doing this rather than the previous supplier, this is what I would do differently, and this is why I would do it differently. As developers, we always self-reflect. We run retrospectives every 2 weeks to do exactly that, to make sure that we're constantly looking at things and going, if I had my time again, would I do it anything different? Yes, I would. We learn from our mistakes. Everything is a chance to learn and to move things forward. Thanks, Lisa. Okay, so I mentioned foundations just now. What does a good CRM foundation look like? Pretty much ticking all the boxes that I've just gone through. So planning and vision, making sure that you know the identity of your CRM system or the database, or to be honest, any software that you're doing. Have a specific role, a primary role that system is trying to achieve, where if you peeled everything back, it still achieves that. So making sure you've got it, and then making sure you stick to it and you check in with it every so often, and you're not kind of venturing off into other systems. Governance, so really important, really ties in with the ALM, that last point, the application lifecycle management. Make sure, it can feel like absolute overkill when you just want to change an option set, and you've got to do it in a development environment, and then you've got to deploy it through to a test environment, and then you've got to get sign off, and then you've got to put it into production, and it's like, I just wanted a new option. But it is really important. The smallest things are the ones that usually trip you up, where you think it's going to take you an hour and it ends up taking you 2 days, because actually by adding in an option what someone didn't think of was the fact that that option set controls another workflow or automation, and suddenly this option set actually needs to be included in that automation so that the automation will run and keep it in line. It was more than just an option set. It was a bit of an iceberg in terms of a requirement. That testing in a pre-production environment is absolutely key to catching things like that. Otherwise, you're just going into production, then it's wrong. Then people lose faith in the system because a deployment's gone wrong. And then the feeling around the system goes down, and then that user adoption starts dropping, and we get back into the issues that we were seeing earlier on a previous slide. So the governance can feel like a complete ball and chain, but it's very worth doing. Security is the other one. So making sure that your security model is understood and scalable. Security within the Power Platform can be very complex in terms of how to build it, and the amount of granularity that you have from table level down to column level, having teams involved rather than individuals involved. It all builds this really complicated kind of tapestry of what can be achieved. So understanding before you jump into trying to configure, understanding what you want to achieve with security within the system and what it might look like going forwards is key. Making sure that once it is in place, your new starters process is updated accordingly as well. It's one of the most common things that we see is new starters being added in, but in systems that have multiple business units. And actually, because the new starter process has gone to someone in IT that doesn't know the context of this person, they've just added them in, given them a license, given them a role, and in they go. When actually they needed to be put in the correct business unit, be given the correct role. So making sure that ownership of those processes is in the right place with the people that know what needs to be done. So whether that new starter process or the new starter request form has on it, and this is what they need in the CRM system, or whether it's once IT have done their bit, there is a CRM administrator who knows what they need. But all of this stuff, make sure that those foundations are stable, and stable foundations are incredibly important for being able to build stable structures on top of. Right, the future of CRM. So where to start with this one? Ben, do you want to have a little go?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So thanks, Nick. The future of CRM, as Lisa mentioned at the top of the call, this very much is around what we believe the future of CRM is and what that means to our Dynamics 365 customers. And these questions have resulted from a number of discussions with our customers over the past 6 months. As we enter into this new world of AI and additional telemetry that's available to our fingertips, there seems to be a common theme that's arising from both our customers and prospects around, well, what does this actually mean in the world of CRM? So what we've done in this section is try to collate some of those questions that have been asked on a frequent basis to get both of our views on what that might be for you and for anyone who's considering the adoption of a new CRM system. So generally speaking, will big Dynamics 365 systems still exist, Nick, in the future?
I mean, no one's got a crystal ball, but I think they still will in some places. But I think they will start fading away, and it kind of leads into that second point of one system or microservices. So Ben and we've had discussions many times on many a drive into customer meetings about architecture and one system or microservices, and the kind of wider community. Everyone's got an opinion on what to do, and it is a case of what fits really. So historically, my thought would have been one system. We see a lot of big big CRM systems or relationship management systems, which have grown out of time over time and got bigger and bigger and bigger and have been kind of the one-stop shop. So let's say it was, oh gosh, let's say it was an apartment kind of organization that originally were looking at just customers and making sure that people who use their services were recorded, and a bit of case management for when they've got a problem with one of their rentals. And then starts kind of going, okay, well, we've got all the customers coming in, so we may as well put marketing in there. And then if we got marketing in there, we may as well put some sales in there so that we can do prospects. And all of these things make complete sense. You've got this hub of information, and actually, yeah, it really does make sense. But what you start having is this system getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the complexity obviously getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Whereas you could slice that up and have separate environments, so that you just have an environment for each specific kind of sector of or section of the organization, and then use Power Automate to move data between the different systems, or have a hub and spoke methodology. It really, really depends on kind of overlap, how useful it's going to be, whether the moving parts is a good trade-off for the simplicity in terms of administration, because separating out means that development can happen at different times. Keeping them in one place means development's a bit trickier to happen at different times. So there is no one answer. But I think when you come on to what the future might look like, or what a future CRM might look like, and that topic of AI that Ben just mentioned, it does feel like the Dataverse is poised to transform into a data repository of well-structured data that AI agents can then point at and kind of bring information out of. And the kind of the existence of an application, a front-end application with forms that you interact with, is probably going to fade away, and it will be turned more into, hey, I need to do this, and it will interact with that data that is stored within the system. And if that's the case, then actually, going back to the first question, yes, it'll probably be a big Dynamics 365 system, but it won't be Dynamics 365. It'll just be a big Dataverse. Everything will be piled in, and then the agents will be just picking the right data, because actually all of those problems about developing new fields and automations and things like that will start to come down, because there's less need for it in the future. That's one option. It's going to be years before that happens. I think that the generations, certainly my generation, we're so used to having an application to touch and feel and see things. It's not going to be until we're well out of the workforce and making those decisions before those changes really come through, unless you're really in a kind of a modern, forward-thinking organization.
Nick, just whilst we're on the subject of those larger monolithic systems that we typically come across, if an organization finds themselves in that position, who wants to understand about the options that they have about breaking the system up into those applications, how could they go about doing that?
So I think the first thing is to really, again, reflect on the system. So take a step back and just look at the stakeholders within the system. So who are the users? What groups do they fall into? And what do they use the system for? And in effect, what you're doing is you're kind of constructing a bit of a Venn diagram of, okay, well, we've got customer service here, we've got sales here, and there's a bit of an overlap for some people that become customers. And then we've got maybe the return, maybe it's the warehouse for doing fulfillment. well, they're over, and they're kind of overlapping with both of them, because the people that you sell to would have come from sales, but people may do returns, and that will come through customer service. So you have to really understand who's using the system before you can start going, okay, well, this is how it carves up. Because once you've understood those overlaps, you have to think, okay, well, what happens if we break the overlap? At the moment, they're in the same system. What happens if they weren't? What would if I said to the head of that department tomorrow, you can't see that information anymore, would they mind? Would they be bothered? Would they go, well, that's okay, I only really use the headline figures. Okay, well, I can get you the headline figures from another system. That's easy. We can surface data through Fabric or whatever. So just because you need to be able to see data from one circle in another circle doesn't mean that that data has to be in your system. Sometimes it's just a one-to-one thing. Usually marketing's the bit in the middle that just needs everything from everywhere, or certainly at least elements of everything from everywhere. So if I give an example of a system that has transactional payments in it, so maybe people paying for memberships, for example, monthly. So you've got little and often, millions of rows of transactions. Marketing want to be able to market to people that have a certain kind of payment history. They don't really need all of those millions of transactions. They might just need a month by year total of how much people have paid, and that may be enough, and that will go from millions of records down to hundreds of thousands. So you would save a lot of processing power and also data storage. So there's lots of different ways, but it all starts with kind of lifting the lid, and not from a technical point of view, just from a business process point of view, what you're using the system for.
Thanks, Dave. And just one last question, whilst we're on the subject of what does the future look like? You mentioned that the Dataverse is going to play a huge role, generally speaking, in that future. But how and what responsibility does Dataverse bring when compared to something like Fabric? I think it's really good to draw those distinctions between Dataverse and Fabric.
Yeah, I think you're probably talking about two sides of the same coin, really. So Fabric usually is a data warehouse with lots and lots of data in it from lots of disparate systems. And the Dataverse data is normally in that Fabric system as well. So if you're an organization, and I'm talking hypothetically here, if you're an organization with Fabric in place and the Dataverse in place, it's likely that in Fabric you'll have a subset of the data that's in Dataverse. So that might be kind of higher level information, or just a couple of the entities that, or tables that that are useful for the wider organization and organization's BI. So your AI agent that you're using to kind of interrogate data or whatever it is may use one or the other, or it might use both, a combination of both. Again, it's really down to the architecture. So Dataverse would be facilitating kind of your business processes. So for example, if I was to go on to an AI agent in Copilot or something and say, hey, add a new opportunity for company A, I've been talking to Chris, I'm feeling really good at it, they're looking at a new dynamic system, that would go into Dataverse. That's where that lives. If I was saying, give me a trend analysis on all sales across the organization, that's going to go to Fabric. So it's just using the right tool for the right job.
Perfect. Thank you, Nick. So everyone's favorite word, AI. And what does this mean to CRMs and particularly Dynamics 365? So in your opinion, Nick, what is the opportunity with AI in Dynamics?
So within the realms of Dynamics and the Dataverse and the Power Platform, it's huge, to be honest, from using it to interrogate data and get insights into data that's within the system, to using it to make suggestions and automate things that are going to are happening. So you may well want to investigate co-pilot agents that when a email comes in or a case comes in, it will analyze the subject and the description, have a look at the knowledge base articles, and offer up an initial response saying kind of, hey, these are typically things that would help. Or getting a read on the sentiment and working out whether it was a customer that you probably shouldn't, because they seem a little bit annoyed right now, and actually it should go to a handler so that they can make contact with them. There are the problem with AI is it's so open. It's so versatile in the way that it can be used, that I think that organizations and suppliers are really struggling with what does a project look like that involves AI. Typically what will happen is a customer will come to us and we know we need to use AI to improve efficiencies, but we don't know what. So we've put some budget, can you do something for us? And we'll turn around and go, okay, well, what do you want it to do? And the response will be, we don't know what we want it to do. So really, before embarking on trying to work out how to implement some AI, if that is even a term, I would embark on more of a digital transformation business analysis project first. You need to know where you are. So all the things that we've been talking about this morning already, you need to know where you are, where your system is, what does the estate look like, which we'll come on to in a minute. Where do we want to go before you start engaging in, okay, can we use AI to help us do that? It's not a solution, it's a tool. It's probably the easiest way to think of it. Putting in AI just on its own, whether that be Copilot, Claude, whatever, is not going to fix anything. It's a tool to fix things, and you need to know what you want to use it to do. So don't put it in thinking it's going to be a magic bullet. It will only do what you ask it to do and what you instruct it to do. So you need to give it some guidance.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, going back to your earlier point of setting a good foundation, and we talk a lot about this in the Microsoft 365 world, particularly in the realm of Copilot, and we talk about readiness, but that same principle and that same practice of readiness applies to Dynamics and Dataverse as well, right? So how can organizations prepare themselves to make use of that tool set that is AI?
So the key thing with the Dataverse is making sure that your tables and your columns have all got meaningful descriptions. That's like the bare minimum. So historically, the description on a column, not many people gave it much thought. It would appear if you hover over a field, that tooltip you get is the description of the field. So typically you'd get it for out of the box columns, but for newer columns, no one really bother unless it was something that was really needed an explanation. The MCPs that ship with the Dataverse use those descriptions to work out where data is. So the table description and the column description. So that's kind of the bare minimum. The next element is make sure that your security policy is in a good shape and you're not just sitting with everyone at system admin. Again, the MCP, the tool list that comes in underneath it includes the ability for an agent to create or delete a table if the person has the security to do so, and the same to delete records, which you're not going to want. So make sure that people do not have too much power is again pretty fundamental, and also that will restrict kind of which records they can see and all that kind of stuff. So it's about having planning, and then in terms of when you actually get to the point of maybe you've opted to use, let's say, Claude, and allow your employees to point to the Dataverse. Make sure you roll it out in a controlled way. So create the remote connector rather than a local proxy, and there's documentation around all of this to make sure that you can govern it centrally rather than people just creating their own connections into APIs. One of the downsides, or again, the upside and the downside with AI is you can just say, can you connect to it? It can find out how to do it and bypass the MCPs, and then you're kind of in a bit of a problem. So governance around all of this is something that I think every organization is trying to find their way with, and making sure that people don't have too much the ability to do too many things that are damaging. They're kind of locked down to only do the things that they should be able to do.
Yeah, so it sounds like in answer to the next question, where should people start? It's very much at that point of governance and good CRM hygiene. But outside of that, is there anything that customers should be considering if they want to make use of AI, whether that be through Copilot natively in Dynamics or something like Claude?
Yeah, I think if you're toying with the idea and you want to have a play, don't do it on your production system. Is my advice. Everyone has the ability. If you've already got Dynamics, you've got the ability to spin up sandbox environments. Those environments, sorry, not sandbox, developer environments. Those developer environments do not consume any of your storage costs. They're fully featured, and you can put some data in there, have a play, build some tables, safe as houses. You don't need to touch your standard system, your production system. If you're not happy with doing that yourselves, engage with a partner. So engage with someone like us at Chorus to talk through, this is what we're thinking, this is what we'd like to explore. We do lots and lots of proof of concepts where we just go, okay, let's spend 5 days, give me a brief, and let's see what we can do in 5 days. And then at the end of it, I'll hand over a developer environment or a trial environment. You can have a play with it and see what you think, and see if this is something that's got legs and you want to follow up. It's a really good way to get in. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be a production ready system, but it will give you enough to be able to actually see for yourself and touch, what does this thing look like? What's in it? How far can I push it?
Thank you very much, Nick. I'm just very conscious of time, and I could ask you questions all day, but just going over to the question panel, I can see that we have received just a couple of questions. Could the Power Platform end up replacing Dynamics 365 using Power Apps instead?
It could, in theory. I don't think that Microsoft are going to suddenly pull the first-party apps. If they do, it won't be for a while, but ultimately they're all built on the Power Platform. So yeah, there's no reason. It's always an interesting one. So an example that I'm going through at the moment, we have an organization who needs to be able to segment their data. They don't sell anything. It's using the Power Platform just as a regular relational database. And yes, you can do an advanced find and kind of create filters, but then getting the results of that filter grouped together underneath another record. So let's say it's an output record. Like in Dynamics, that would be a marketing list. You'd create a marketing list, you'd put an advanced find next to it, and it would give you even more abilities because you could do a static list or a dynamic list, but whatever. But you don't get that in the Power Platform. So the only option is two options is to move up to a Dynamics license, which comes with a huge uplift in license cost just for the ability to create a marketing list, or build that functionality within the Power Platform somehow. So either you build that record that replaces the marketing list, and then you build an Azure function to run something through, or Power Automate, or you use a Copilot to interrogate your data and add it in. But all of those options just use the Power Platform. So quite often you find yourselves wanting a little tiny bit of those first-party apps, those Dynamics 365 apps, but you don't want the whole thing. And that's, I think, where they'll start fading out a little bit. But they're so, I mean, I've been working with the platform for near 20 years. Service and sales has been there since the dawn of time. So I just don't see them disappearing.
And that leads on to our second question that we've received in the chat. What options are best for licensing costs? And I assume what the person who's asking that question is, what's the difference between Dynamics and Power when it comes to licensing? And as Nick alluded to, there is a big difference from a commercial perspective. It really depends on what tables you're accessing within the Dataverse. So there is such a thing in Dataverse called restricted tables, and Nick alluded to it earlier, that being marketed list. That would be considered a restricted table, which would require you to have a Dynamics 365 license. So in answer to your question, it really depends. It really depends on what tables you're accessing. And one thing that we have been able to identify for our customers who are typically licensing themselves through Dynamics, upon further discovery, as it transpires, they're not actually accessing any of those restricted tables that are available using the Dynamics 365 app. What we're able to do is actually reduce that license to a Power App license, because it will give them access to the tables that are available within the Dataverse for them. So it really does depend on your requirement and what tables you're going to be accessing as part of that functionality. Nick, is there anything you would want to add to that?
No, I think you've summed it up pretty well. It's why when we are working with customers to provide a system, it's so important for us to not know just what we're doing now, but a bit of a roadmap for the organization on where it wants to go, because we would love to put everyone on the Power Platform and keep those costs low. However, in 5 years' time, if someone's going to turn around and go, actually, do you know what, our license with our current marketing provider is going to expire and we want to use the customer insights within Dynamics, we can't use Power Platform. We have to use Dynamics going forward. And that doesn't mean everyone has to be licensed at the Dynamics level. It just means we need to have one of them so that we can have Dynamics in there. You can mix and match. So it's an incredibly impactful area of the system, trying to plan out what's going to be used by whom so that we can get that licensing fee down, because it has an effect not just on license costs, but also on data costs as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Nick. There doesn't seem to be any more questions in the chat as it stands. And I appreciate we are a few minutes over, so really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you so much for joining. If there are any questions that you have that you would like to raise with either myself and Nick, please feel free to get in touch, and we will look forward to speaking to you again very soon.